Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank you for the invite to be in the exhibition and to speak today. I'm an artist with a focus on the non-visual senses. I'm going to take you through a few key works that show how I work with scent and how that's changed over the years, over the past few decades. However, to start, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. So I'm going to be really strict and ask you not to speak to one another. This is really important. Just please smell the red strips that are coming your way and write down what you think it is. Or keep in mind a word or a sentence, if you don't have a pen, to describe the scent. Yeah, just write it down or just remember and, just the first thing that comes to your mind, if you can. And I'll just give you a minute. And then I'll ask you. So I'll put the stopwatch on. There we go. Toilet cleaner? Okay. Anybody else get something different? A mothball? Okay. Excrement? Yeah, okay. Cow excrement. Okay, so an animal. Okay, that's very precise, yeah. Anything else? We got 7 seconds. Broken armpit molecules, okay. Yeah, of course you can put it away, yes. You can throw it away even. Okay, so basically, it's really, really hard to describe a scent. Whenever I start a talk, I get people to smell and to try and describe what the scent is. And often, most Western languages, which I think, Thomas, you talked about a wee bit, don't have words for what we smell the way that we do for the other senses. So you could say that I've got a blue top on for the vision. That visual sensation of color you can name. Those flowers are yellow, but you can't do the same with the sense of smell. So you talk about it often in crude dichotomies of good and bad, which as an artist, I'm interested in the space between good and bad very much. I think that's an interesting place to explore. Or you talk about scent as smelling like something, like a mothball, like excrement, like all these things that everybody described just 2 seconds ago. Fragrance is gendered, it's classed, it's culture specific. To not wear a fragrance or deodorant in the West is a sign of being unclean or uncivilized. To be told you have body odor is an insult. However, as social anthropologist David Howes has pointed out, odor hedonics take on a different dimension in other cultures. So the Shipibo Conobo of Peru, for example, have healing rituals that refer to the smell of evil spirits. The evil spirits in their culture smell of the odor of gasoline, fish poison, and certain products of the cosmetic industry, such as soap, deodorants, and so on. My work is often invisible. I work with scent and social space, creating ephemeral installations and interventions. I have a long-standing commitment to navigating the space between the visible object and what we cannot see, but can feel and exerts an influence on us. Underlying my practice is an obsession with what is invisible, either literally through the non-visual senses or through dominant social relations and attitudes. So I'm just going to show you some pictures now rather than talk. Oh, hang on. There we go. Okay, so this is Eau Claire from 1992 to 93. It's a self-portrait in scent presented in a hand-blown perfume bottle, a work made while I was a student and one of my first scent pieces. It came out of a feminist analysis. The odor was mostly vaginal. I, like many women artists around that time, was questioning the objectifying male gaze. That was the discourse that was going around in art schools at the time. I was also perhaps questioning the male nose. The scent was organic and vaginal. I made it myself without any chemistry background, but with a lot of enthusiasm, trial and error. And it was, as Waldo, who's in the audience, and in the exhibition once described, a bit of a punk approach. I think that's what you said in London a few years ago, that our approach is a bit punk. And I thought that was a brilliant thing to say. It was first displayed on a shelf at counter height, and the viewer was able to open the bottle and smell it, perhaps getting a bit of a surprise. Making this work opened up a whole world to me. Around the same time, electronic scent dispensers, which Jim spoke a bit about, and plug-in fragrances were just becoming available on the market. And fragrance was being pumped out into public space electronically through sensory marketing. Our air was being controlled. If you went to the supermarket, for the first time you could find aisles not only with scents marketed to mask odors, and make your home smell more desirable through, spray cans, but also plug-in air fresheners with strong fragrances that could be on all the time without you having to spray them yourself. I was interested in subverting this technology, but it was difficult to access at the time, especially with limited resources and with what I wanted to do with it. Because, if you talk to a fragrance company and said, listen, this is what I'd like to do, it's not marketable. And so they're not interested in you, right? So I wound up making my own very crude scent dispensers with motion sensors that I soldered together that allowed the movement of the audience to trigger the dispersal of the scent. This series of works were just a scent in an empty space, in an empty room. And Self-Portrait in Scent, sketch number 1, 1994, at the Centre for Contemporary Art in Glasgow, was one of these. And I did various scent self-portraits like this, also with scent strips that the viewer could just take away with them, and they were, very crude. Then I'm going to move forward to 1998. In 1998, I was asked to do an artist residency in Melbourne. The news was dominated by the impeachment trial of Bill Clinton and what was on Monica Lewinsky's blue dress, what constitutes sex, and so on. I decided to make a work with the scent of semen in response, and also to make a counter to Eau Claire, almost like a male version of Eau Claire, and to test this out, what would happen. This is an image of it at the Tower Studio, part of 200 Gertrude Street Gallery. It was nothing but the scent in a room and a title. I've been asked to exhibit this work several times, and each time it changes. It changes with the context of the gallery architecture or the museum architecture and so on. The reactions to the work vary from audience members recognizing it and telling me intimate stories about their lives that I don't need to know, to not recognizing it at all, because people can be anosmic. Anosmic is it's like color blindness, but it's with your sense of smell. And people are experiencing it now through COVID, this anosmia. The last time I exhibited it, I was thinking about how often artists don't like to exhibit old work and how I can change the work into something in a different context, how it could live and perform rather than be exhibited like a static object. And I was thinking a lot about this Duchamp quote, where he talks about how there is a life in a work of art that is very short, even shorter than a man's, let's say women's lifetime. I call it 20 years. After 20 years, an Impressionist painting has ceased to be an Impressionist painting because the material, the color, the paint has darkened so much that it is no more what the person, I'm going to change man to person, did when they painted. So I applied this rule to all artworks, and they, after 20 years, are finished. Their life is over. I love that. They are works of art at the time you live, but once you are dead, they die too. I love it. I love it, love it, love it, love it. So in 2016, when I was asked to exhibit Bill at the Kunstverein Wolfsburg, I tested this. That summer, a similar trial was in the news involving the sexual assault of a young student whilst she was unconscious on campus at Stanford by Brock Turner, the university swim star. A court case ensued, and Brock Turner was given a very light sentence of 6 months in jail that was eventually reduced to 3 months. To protest the lightness of the sentence and support the victim, the feminist community at Stanford University and worldwide disseminated Chanel Miller's victim statement via international media outlets. Many women were taking turns reading it out in public and recording it in support of the victim. So you can see here, some of the protests. So basically, if you read this statement, it's super articulate and very powerful writing. I don't know if she was an English student or what, but the writing is really powerful. And you can't think that it was a consensual act after reading it. And the victim statement being being disseminated through public media, through internet and so on, I think changed the court case. Changed the laws, first of all, and then also eventually in 2018, after I exhibited this piece in a different way, the judge had to step down. So it's quite amazing. If you have a chance, read it. So instead of exhibiting Bill the way I normally would at the opening, I had theater student Eva Geckler read out the victim statement in German in the room with the scent. A small limited publication of the statement was available for the audience to take away. It was just a freebie, translated into English and in the original, translated into German, and in the original English as well. Yes, and in the victim statement, one line at the end, she talks about how she will be the lighthouse. I will be your lighthouse is the line that she says. And in relation to writing the victim statement and being like a beacon for other women that have gone through this thing that she's gone through. So I titled the work, I Will Be a Lighthouse in honor of her. Okay, so I don't always use body odors and those kinds of scents. This is skipping to 2013, or going back rather, because the other one was 2017. And this is an intervention where I asked 25 ladies, mostly over the age of 60, to gate crash an art opening. So a young, hip art opening. So it changed the demographic of the audience. And they were asked to wear Christian Dior's perfume Poison. If you don't know the perfume, it's an iconic perfume from the 80s. And basically, if you wore this perfume in the 80s, if you were a young person in the 80s, you thought that you would become a femme fatale. And that's the way it was advertised. So that photo before is my recreation of that, or riff on the advert. What else can I say about the fragrance? The fragrance was one of the first power perfumes in the 80s. And it was meant to really, really be strong, and you would be noticed in a room. So it's quite choking. It's not a subtle perfume by any stretch of the imagination. And you either love it or you hate it. But it was banned in certain public spaces in the 80s as well. So certain restaurants in Los Angeles, for instance, would say, like, you can't wear Georgia or you can't wear poison coming in here because it's just too much. So they did, you know, it was a very subtle thing, but it made an impact. And I call a lot of these works, because I've since done lots of different performances with different fragrances that I've created for certain situations, or that people might recognize, like this iconic fragrance. And I call this series of interventions, or they've got a working title, Airplay. And they've got 3 ingredients. I call them ingredients: a social demographic, a public space, and a fragrance, and that's it. And this kind of goes under Airplay. This piece was called "Bring Back the Hill." So some of the Airplay works have a car in them, or have cars in them. So this particular piece. The demographic was a car group, and it was the East Coast of Scotland car club. And they have these cars. I don't know if they're popular here in Germany as well, but they're lowered. You know, they're kind of pimped up. They're lowered. Sometimes the rims are changed, the rims on the cars. And they have really loud sound systems. And they often, they often also alter the sound of the car. Like, they'll pay hundreds of pounds to make the sound of an earlier car model when they rev up. But it's all electronic, which I didn't know. So I hung out with these Spice Boys, they call them in the UK, and just, you know, found out what it is that they love about the cars and all that. And then we did this performance. They're very antisocial as well because of the noise they make. And they used to hang out at the top of Carlton Hill, but were forbidden because they were so loud. So I managed to work with them through getting permission to get the cars back up at the top of the hill, at the top of Carlton Hill. And I created a fragrance, a diesel fragrance that we dispersed during it, that you could also buy as a small edition multiple.
525 British horsepower.
We made a composition with recordings from the car. It was kind of like a techno composition, but the instruments was like the windows going up and down and the motor revving up and things like that. So yeah, so that's that. And there's other car pieces. Like I worked with Custom Culture, which is a hot rod car club in Glasgow. And it's very different. It's a older group of men, and they do things like this with the cars. And I made each car a fragrance. So when they drove down the street during Glasgow International Festival of Art, they each had their own fragrance that would disperse on the street. So yeah. This piece also has sound, so I'll give it a try. But this is called IBO OK.
I am getting a funky smell coming from my keyboard. It doesn't smell like anything burnt, but more like BO.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. Any suggestions?
When you say it smells like BO, do you mean like the smell of burning circuit board?
No, BO is body odor. Think stinky armpits. Foul. Definitely not plastic smell. It's human.
I can't believe someone has described this smell the exact same way I thought of it. I too had the smell, a mixture of stinking armpits, cumin, or plastic lawn furniture that's been in the sun for a while. I was ashamed, and hoped it would just go away.
At first I thought the smell was the family dog. Then I started to notice her body language. She would sniff around and crinkle her face. The smell would persist after she left the room. That's when I started to think it might be me.
Weird. I swore it was a smell lingering from a visitor to the gallery. I thought, man, this guy needs a shower, but I could still smell the body odor when I was alone. I really didn't want to talk about it.
So basically, there's this model of iBook that I was using in, I guess it would have been the early 2000s or mid 2000s. And one day I was using it. It was one that I had from work, and it stank like BO. It stank like body odor, and I couldn't work out what it was. And then I smelled it. I was like, it's the computer. This is a gift. So basically, I looked online at the time, and there were loads of chats about this particular model smelling like body odor. So I created this narrative for 3 laptops. So each laptop had a different voice, and it would just play like that off the computer. And it would play every 10 minutes or so not all the time. You might just see this scene in the gallery and you might think it was an office. And then if you were in at the right time, the computers would start talking, but they would increase in smell, with the heat of the computer over the day. And that's the work, that's it. So sometimes I use objects, but a lot of the earlier work, particularly, there's no object, it's just the scent. Sorry. No, we don't need to listen to it again. And then we'll just flip to now. So this is Amik, which is an exhibition that's on right now in Glasgow, and it's an installation. Yes, and basically it's a site-specific installation over 4 rooms, reflecting on 2 cities that I've lived in, North Bay, Ontario, Canada, where I was born, and Glasgow, Scotland, where I live now, and their connected histories through tracing the roots of castoreum. Castoreum is a material that comes from the castor sacs of a beaver, and it's been used in flavors and fragrances, sometimes even to flavor tobacco. The material is a byproduct of the fur trade, a trade that was directly linked to the colonization of the Indigenous population in Canada. This desire to extract both beaver pelts for top hats and clothing and castoreum has direct links to the building where the Gallery of Modern Art is presently housed in Glasgow, as the Gallery of Modern Art was once the Royal Exchange, where tobacco, furs, and everything was traded, and the Hudson Bay Company, who traded for furs for the Crown in Britain, was a member. So, and then my hometown in Canada houses the largest fur harvesters in North America, and the furs and castoreum trapped there would have at one point made it to the gallery, when it was the Royal Exchange, to be traded. There isn't enough time to talk about the work here, but suffice to say, I created a scent that haunts the Gallery of Modern Art, that forms part of the installation, that hints at this history. And then finally, and the installation had films and all sorts of things, and some giant castoreum beaver balls. So finally, the good, the bad, and the ugly are, which is where we started, but in Italian. Or I tried to translate it through Google. I don't know if it works, but it's in German. But anyway, so finally, terrain denial, my work for this exhibition. Part of developing my work involves visiting labs and meeting with scientists interested in scent, or other people studying scent in whatever way. On one such occasion, I met with someone that was funded by the US Military of Defense DARPA program to try and create a less than lethal terrain denial weapon as via scent. A fancy way of saying they were asked to create a stink bomb. Interestingly, they found that there was no universal scent that would work, because they found through testing this in different situations and places that scent preferences are culturally determined.
So what we find offensive in the West, they don't in Papua New Guinea, for instance. They don't. They gave me one of the formulas, and this is what I've used for the exhibition here on a timer once an hour. And I think that's it. Oh, and then there's these pictures here, really, really quickly. These are just some reactions to some of my work that someone took on their smartphone. So you can see someone over there is covering their nose. And over here, someone's a bit like that. And then over here, some people are kind of maybe crinkling their nose, but also laughing. So it's these kinds of things that I really love about smell is like today we saw someone come out really like running out like this, I think. It's these sorts of things that I really like about smell, that they're non-verbal, but they create that kind of reaction that I think is really hard now when everything's so visually saturated and so on. So I think I'll stop there. I hope I didn't go over, but thank you. Yeah. Okay.